I would like to call to order the meeting of the Monroe County Solid Waste Management District Board of Directors and the Citizens Advisory Committee. And we have 3 items on our agenda today, April 14th, 2022. A memorandum concerning the City of Bloomington utilities regarding their resource recovery program feasibility study. Then a 5-year plan progress and implementation. And last item is apartment recycling. So let's jump right into the memorandum of understanding with City of Bloomington Utilities. And I will turn this over to Mr. McGlasson. And then we have with us today, Mr. Vic Kelson, Director of City of Bloomington Utilities, to join us for discussion. Mr. McGlasson.
Again, this is something that the board has previously looked at, where the City of Bloomington Utilities is asking for some collaboration and financial assistance to conduct a feasibility study on installing an anaerobic digester at their Blucher Pool wastewater treatment plant. This would be a facility that would accept food waste, fats, oils, and grease, and through the anaerobic digestion process would create a what's called a biogas that can be used as a heat source to generate electricity, or sold back onto the gas pipelines if it's cleaned up a little bit. Additionally, there is a solid waste byproduct out of it that can be land applied as a soil amendment or a fertilizer. So there are some beneficial products that come out of the anaerobic digester process. And again, this is just to fund a study to see if it's feasible to install such a facility at the Blucher Pool wastewater treatment plant. And it is, it is something that would, that would divert materials currently going to a landfill, from going to a landfill and using them in essence as a waste to energy fuel. So there is some benefit to it, and then that would be something that would align with the district's mission and some of the district's goals. I think like I said, this has been discussed previously, and I think the board has delayed action on it due to a desire to have a discussion, get input from the CAC, which is the purpose of this joint meeting, and that's why we're here. So with that, I would defer to Mr. Kelson for any technical questions regarding the project, and or any questions that the board may have or the CAC may have.
So, Mr. Kelson, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
I am happy to be here.
We've had presentations before about the purpose of the study. And so I think this gathering today is really to ask questions and to offer comments. So we've heard plenty from the board already today. Let's just hear from the CAC. Excuse me, Ms. Giffens.
Yes, I'd like to know if Randy Cox, she's on the CAC, is that correct? Could she please be promoted to a panelist so that she can participate?
I've sent that. She has to accept that.
Okay, thanks.
And Mr. Brad Lucas is also.
Sorry?
Mr. Lucas, isn't he also on the CAC?
Yes. He just unmuted himself.
Yeah, all right, very good.
Glad to have you here virtually. Thank you. So for those of you who are not here in person, please use the raised hand function so I will know that you wish to speak. Thanks. So CAC, let's hear from you about your thoughts on this proposal. Anybody want to make a comment?
I do have a comment that I would like to make, but I would like to leave it open to questions if anyone has any first before making a comment.
Okay, questions or comments can be.
I guess I'll start by saying that land application provides tens of thousands of dollars of free nutrients to farmers in our community and can help promote sustainable local agriculture. That's just one of many reasons why biodigestion is such a critical component to sustainability in our community.
Thank you.
On a similar note, we will note that for many agricultural purposes, like nurseries, oh, did I tap my thing off? I'm good, okay. For many agricultural purposes, those land applied biosolids actually don't really have the nutrient profile and soil structure that you would really need. So from our perspective, the kinds of products that you can get from a diversified composting operation, whether that's organic compost, conventional compost, compost teas, you can adjust those with mycorrhiza to have specialty blends for specialty purposes. And as we get also into creating organic composts, that would allow us to serve a lot of the groundbreaking historic farms in the county, as well as a lot of new farmers that are looking for organic products. So we are also interested in keeping a lot of that food waste to make it into compost for the local agricultural economy as well.
Thank you.
Can I ask a
Yes.
clarifying question? So, Mr. Conway, you meant that, so Mr. Manley said this would be, the outputs of the biodigester would be a great land application for agriculture. But then Mr. Conway was saying that it's not ideal in all situations. As far, it depends on what you're growing. Is that what you mean? But it could be amended?
I think that is context dependent, and a lot of land application biosolids go into like larger conventional farming kind of situations. And local markets with smaller organic farms need a higher quality product like a local compost can provide.
Okay. So it would be great in some applications, but not perhaps in small organic local farms.
Yeah, it's like market fit, like product market fit. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So I have a question about the application of these byproducts, especially by big farms that use large-scale equipment and the traditional methods of amending their soil. How adaptable is this equipment to using what would be produced by the biodigester? Does anybody know?
I guess it would depend on if it was a liquid or more of a solid product. If it's liquid, it can be injected, knifed into the soil. More solid product could be incorporated into the soil. Surface application is not ideal and can cause vector issues, spreading disease and whatnot. So really, incorporation or injection is ideal for this type of product.
So it sounds like the study should consider the use of the product so that we fully understand what's needed. Mr. McGlasson?
Just two quick things. Mayor Hamilton has joined the meeting.
Oh, good.
And then to remind the board, Mr. Manley previously has worked for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management and has done a number of land application permits for these biosolids. They're very, very well versed in what it is we're talking about here.
So we're very lucky to have him for this discussion. Okay. So welcome, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. I'm really sorry. I may have to jump in and out. I just wanted to be sure to be here if I could, but I'm stepping out of another event, but I'll try to keep together here and keep listening. Thank you.
So let's hear other questions or comments. And if we have questions, maybe Mr. Kelson could make comments.
Yeah,
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anything from the board? Mr. Winia?
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead with the comment that I would like to make, which is more so based on the finances, the financial aspect of this decision. And I know that the discussion is for half of the cost of the feasibility study, which equates to about $65,000. But I think it's important to take the full project cost into account now for this decision. And that's because at the March 10th meeting, Director Kelson made some remarks that really shaped how I think the project should be considered. And to paraphrase it, he said, once the study is complete, it will take a countywide, community-wide effort to decide whether we want to do it or not. And I don't see this project I don't see this as a project that would be a City of Bloomington utilities project. I see it as a county-wide project, and paraphrase. So knowing that even after the feasibility study, it will require the support of the full community and most likely the district as well, I think it would only be logical to contribute to the study now if the district also intends to contribute to the installation of the biodigester if deemed feasible. So with that framework in mind, considering the full project involvement, I want to point out that while the biodigester does align with the district's mission statement to reduce the amount of final waste going to disposal, it doesn't figure into the recommendations of the 2018 Kessler Organics Waste Recovery Analysis recommendations, which instead states that it requires significantly more capital investment and higher operational costs than windrow composting, but also that it doesn't really closely align with the goals and objectives of the 5-year management plan either, which I can go through or point out if you want to afterwards. But because of that, I would say we're looking at more of an opportunity cost trade in terms of spending on the biodigester versus focusing on the management plan goals and objectives. And I think that it would be reasonable to prioritize the management plan goals and the Kessler recommendations, especially in light of the anticipated district host fee on the cash reserves. So while we'll be discussing the plan implementation following this agenda item, I won't iterate through all of those goals and expenses here, but I think if we were to consider other expenses outside of that scope, I think if the equivalent amount of funds would produce a higher gain and planetary impact if they were invested in something like either additional active district staff position for waste reduction and diversion, or even a public-private partnership to expand composting capacity for the existing service providers because of the lower capital requirements and the higher gains of going through that method. So I do want to express that I profoundly appreciate the City of Bloomington Utilities and Mayor Hamilton's pursuit of this considerable improvement to the waste stream and their readiness to make substantial investments to it. And I'm very excited about this opportunity to have a conversation about collaboration. But I also strongly believe that if the whole community is going to convene around a single initiative, it needs to be a really high impact gain, like the waste reduction and education campaign or edible food waste recovery initiatives that are already specified in the city's sustainability and climate action plan and the district's 5-year management plan, rather than pursuing an alternative goal. So that is my full scope of thought on this proposal.
Thank you very much. So let's hear other questions or comments from the CAC or the board. Ms. Piedmont-Smith?
I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Winia's comments. So the Kessler report, can you remind us, because it's been a while since I've looked at it, and it was from 2018, so 4 years ago now. What did it say about a biodigester? Did it not mention it?
So in the 2018 organic waste recovery analysis, because there were 2 of them, so this is just the one that focused on the organic waste, it didn't actually make mention of a biodigester in the recommendations. It recommended district drop-off collection, city-sponsored collection for single-family households, commercial and institutional collection, private composting facilities, coordinated outreach and education that spans generator types, and an organics recovery stakeholder group that engages in various parties in the development. So the, let's see. The other report that was generated was the waste recovery processing, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was the not organic recovery, waste recovery and processing report. And that simply just stated what I had mentioned. It also didn't, it stated that it made simplifying assumptions that turned windrow composting would be used instead of biodigestion because of the cost advantages. Does that field your question?
So the Kessler report, it doesn't say don't do a biodigester. It just says it focuses on other ways to reduce organic waste.
Correct. Yeah, the biodigestion is not an inherently bad thing. It's just those are the differences. The methods that they recommended were the lower cost, easier accessibility methods.
Can I comment on this, please?
Yes. Mr. Kelso.
The Kessler report, to my knowledge, did not consider in any way the wastes from wastewater treatment or or those kinds of wastes. Did not consider those as part of that analysis. I think at that time, no one had even raised the issue of whether the utilities department should be treating its wastewater solid wastes anaerobically or aerobically. I think that the calculations may have been different if they had known that there was this other sizable waste stream. If we think holistically about solid waste, it comes from lots of different places. And one of the things about anaerobic digestion is it's a really good way to deal with fats, oils, and grease, which can be real big problems for us in the utilities business. So a program like this, if we're all working together, we can do institutional, commercial, residential, organic waste processing, fats, oils, grease, and wastewater solids. So the purpose of the study is to identify just what the pros and cons of all that would be. At this point, I don't have any idea what a facility would cost. I know it would cost less than the original concept that we were reviewing, which was to build an anaerobic digester at the Dillman plant. I know it will cost less than that because it's more of a composting operation. It's not a large anaerobic digester. So I don't think this is an either or situation. It could be both of these ideas could be considered, but until we know all the costs and benefits, we look at things like tipping fees, possibility of land application at some scale. We really can't identify how this will all work out. The other thing is, when you look at oil and grease, that's a pretty lucrative part of the digester business. And one of the things we want to look into is whether we would be capable of taking on grease from counties near us or even far from us, because right now we don't take any grease or oil from outside of Monroe County. We have no way of treating it. So if we had a facility for treating it, we could that's a market that we can explore that could potentially bring in significant tipping fees and produce a lot of gas. So I don't think it's an either or situation. And the purpose of the study that we're proposing is simply to look at how all of this would work together. And once we know what it costs, once we know what it's capable of, and once we know what kind of a difference it could make to the community, then we can talk about which particular actions we want to take.
Thank you. Mr. McGlasson first and then Ms. Gibbons.
Sorry. I just kind of to add on to Mr. Kelson and Mr. Winnie, the Kessler study focused specifically on Monroe County generated material. And so in that sense, the proposal here could almost be looked at as an extension of that, where we're going to look at materials beyond Monroe County. And this, I don't know what the study is going to come back to say, but, if Kessler had looked at a broader area and the amount of material generated their conclusions may have been different, and I don't know. And that's kind of what this study may show us. And, you know, and as Mr. Kelson said, you know, they may still come back and say, this is not something that you want to do. We don't know what the outcome will be, but I think I think that's an important distinction to make between the study that's occurred and what's being proposed right now.
Thank you. Ms. Gilpin?
Yes, given that this will involve, if the digester goes in, that it will involve processing of wastewater, why isn't the City of Bloomington Utilities willing to fund the whole study?
This is not a utilities project per se. This is a solid waste management project. This project deals with, as we've proposed the study, this is a project that is a general approach to one component of the solid waste stream. We're talking about managing organic wastes that we all know can be recovered and can be recovered beneficially for many purposes. So the solid waste stream from the wastewater plant is a relatively small part of that entire stream. Now, if I back up for a moment historically about how we as CBU got to this place, it came up in the context of a large renovation, modernization, and capacity expansion effort at our Dillman plant. As we got into that project, the question of whether we should do continue to do the aerobic digestion process that we have there now, or whether we should switch to anaerobic, that question, we delayed any action on our digesters until we got to the bottom of that question. When we looked at it, what we found was that we would essentially, because of the design of the Dillman plant, we would have to basically replumb the whole plant in order to switch to anaerobic digestion. That just simply isn't cost effective. Now, one day in the future, if we have to go to 25 million gallons per day, at that point, we would have to replumb the plant anyway, and in which case that would be a sensible time for us to look at that. But that's probably 15 years or more down the road. What we then started to look at, though, is we do have lots of primary solids at the Blue Tree Pool plant. And we did identify a lot of organic wastes that could be readily collected. And we already have relationships with the grease haulers and those folks, because we're we regulate grease and we in food service establishments. So we have a pretty good program, a pretty good access to those potential customers for a facility like this. So what we did was we began looking at what could be done at the Blue Tree Pool plant, where we have a large asphalt area there that has nothing on it right now. It's where we used to compost wastewater solids years ago. We're surrounded by farmland, and we own a lot of farmland down there. So it seemed like an opportunity for us to look at some more expansive ideas that would be oriented towards the general solid waste problem. The fact is, the only part of that we really manage is the organic waste from the plant. So I would guess that the majority of the solids that would be arriving at the facility would be arriving from places that weren't related to wastewater in any way at all, other than perhaps the restaurants whose grease we regulate. So it is not a CBU project. It is a solid waste project that would require cooperative participation from a number of entities: Solid Waste Management District, City Public Works, maybe some investor-owned organizations, the university, the public schools, hospitals, et cetera, like that. So an initiative like this is bigger than just the utilities department and our little 6 million gallon per day treatment plant. So this is a way of just putting your marker down and saying, let's all talk about this. We're not going to build it by ourselves. It's going to have to be something that would be done in partnership with others. So we'd like to have that partnership as we start the investigation so that everybody's questions get answered as we go through the process. So it's not simply me worrying about grease and wastewater solids.
Thank you, Mr. Kelson.
Mr. Kelson, to build on the, this whole discussion of this being a community-wide partnership and activity, has the university been approached to contribute to cost share of future investment in the project itself? I recall a conversation with Steve Akers at the university a few years back where pre-pandemic, the university was capturing up to 50,000 pounds of compostable materials per month and sending it to a composting operation, I believe ran by Kevin Huntley. Has the university been approached at all in these conversations?
When we began the earlier conversation about the Dillman plant, we were in contact with the university. The university in a situation, say this facility existed, the university would be a customer of the facility. So they would pay whatever the tipping fees were and receive whatever benefits they got from that. So it would not be, I wouldn't see this as being a situation where we didn't go looking for them to pitch in on this particular study. I'm certainly not opposed to asking them, but at this time, I would say that they're most likely to be a customer of this facility.
So I will interject here that I had an email discussion with Mr. Srivastav of the university, who is in charge of dining. And he is certainly interested in knowing more. So they do want to be part of the discussion. Questions or comments? How about our,
Yes, one more thing.
yes, please.
We had a couple weeks, well, I guess the last executive board meeting, I had asked Mr. Baker, the lawyer who's working with the group, to determine whether or not under Indiana Code 13-21-3-14.5, which was called into question when we were looking at whether or not to have a tire program with the solid waste district, whether or not we would be allowed to actually put in money toward the digester itself. And given what Mr. Winia has reminded us of, is that if the study says that this is a good route to go, that you'd be looking to us for funding for the digester. I would like to hear back from Mr. Baker, who's not here with us tonight, about whether or not we would be able to, under Indiana law, actually contribute to this. And I apologize, I had intended to email Mr. Baker 2 days ago, and I had a computer glitch, and so it didn't happen. But I have emailed him while we were in the meeting to ask about that. So I do want that kind of thing answered before we move forward with anything.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions or comments? I'm very sorry that Mr. Baker couldn't be here today to answer on the spot, but that's just not possible.
Ms. Chairman,
Yes,
can you hear me all right?
yes, Mr. Hamilton.
Thanks so much. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there directly, but I guess from what I've heard, I think they're all good questions. It does seem to me that this preliminary question is, do we think it's useful and relevant to the solid waste district to understand whether or not this is a reasonable project to take on as a community, whether or not the solid waste district would join in later, or whether or not it is, we'll find out. But I do feel some sense that, knowing how busy everybody is, that I wish we could determine. I think it is in a way a follow-on from the Kessler study, which was very important to share a lot of information from us. And I think in the scale of things, from my perspective, I wish we would go forward with this. So I just wanted to weigh in. I think it's absolutely appropriate to determine whether or not this would make sense to be a partner in the long run. If it's a good project, well, of course, we need to find out if it's legal to invest in the project itself. But it seems to me there's no question, I don't think, that we could join in the study. And as a solid waste management district responsible to evaluate the best ways to reduce solid waste going to landfills in our area or from our area, it seems to me a clear, good partnership. And I like the partnership between CBU and the solid waste district. And I just would urge that we could go forward with it to get the study going. That would then inform us whether or not anything makes sense to do later, if we want to do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I
Mr.
add a
Carlson?
comment? Yes, thank you. One of the things I didn't mention is that when we assembled the scope of things that we wanted to look into in this study, one of the items in there was this question of how to, if say we decide that it would be beneficial to the community and it's worth pursuing, what different options are there for actually making it happen? And that could include any number of things. There are lots of different models for either doing it as, we could do it as one organization takes it on and builds it and then charges tipping fees to the other participants. It could be done through some sort of public-private partnership. We might even find an investor that wanted to build it and operate it on the property that we have available or some other property. There are lots of different models for how to execute a project like this. One of them would be the solid waste district and the city and whoever else was participating pitching in up front on the capital costs. But there are lots of other models, and so one of the things that we explicitly have asked to look to the consultants to look into is what's been done elsewhere, and how could something like this be executed, and what kind of interest might outside organizations have in providing this service, or at least even some parts of this service for a fee to the community. So I think that question of how do you pay for something like this is in the current world with grant money flying around for infrastructure and everything else going on, I think it's premature to say yes or no, we're going to spend cash on this, because I don't know what model of funding choices that might come out of all of this.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Mr. McGlasson?
And I guess for the benefit of the CAC and the board, so a little frame of reference here. Mr. Winnie is absolutely correct. That for this or anything else that we consider, opportunity cost is something that we have to look at. To that end, what we're being asked for in this instance is about $65,000. This year's budget's 2.8 million. So we're at about 2.3% of this year's budget is what's being asked for. Additionally, the district has in excess of $1 million of cash reserve. So should the board decide to move forward with this and collaborate with CBU, that certainly doesn't financially put the district in a position where it couldn't move forward with other projects or ideas that might come before it. For reference for everybody, the financial impact that we're looking at is minimal.
Thank you very much. Continuing with questions and comments. Ms. Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, I see value in this study, and I feel like it's a study that does take a step towards fulfilling our mission of reducing waste. And it would use that waste for as a renewable resource. So I know it's not specifically spelled out in our 5-year plan. And I do recognize, whenever there's a large amount of money, there's a substantial opportunity cost. And of course, the future of our host fee is somewhat uncertain at this point. That said, I think we could do both. I think we could partner with CBU to fund the study. That does not commit us to funding construction of anything. As Mr. Kelson said, there are many different options that may be possible once the study is completed to move forward. So I would be in favor of entering into this MOU while also moving forward with spending some of our reserves on additional staff and other points that are spelled out in our 5-year plan, which I think we do need to move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Well, are we at a point that anybody's going to offer a motion, or are we going to discuss this after hear from Mr. Baker?
If it's appropriate, I would move adoption of the, I don't know if it's an MOU that to ask staff to sign it, or I'd be happy to offer that motion if it's appropriate.
I'll second that.
What, if I may,
Okay.
in deference to Ms. Gisson's question that she has stated she would like an answer on, I think it would be acceptable if the motion is going to be to enter into the memorandum of understanding, that the motion could be that is contingent on legal counsel's opinion of our ability to do this, given and I'm not sure exactly how you phrased your question to Mr.
Right.
Baker, but I think that the motion could be made if it is to enter into the memorandum of understanding that is contingent on an affirmative answer from legal counsel to Ms. Gisson's question.
I'd be happy to adjust that motion to indicate absolutely it is contingent on legal counsel advising that entering into the memorandum and joining in the collaborative study is legal. Absolutely, that would be appropriate. Sure.
Thank you, Mayor Hamilton. Is that for your second too?
Yes, I will second that revised motion. I do want to just underline what Mayor Hamilton said, that the legal question is whether we can enter into this MOU regarding the study. It remains to be determined in the future whether we would participate in funding the actual construction or management of such a facility if the study so indicates. So that's a question for another day, I think.
We have a motion on the floor. And is there further discussion on this topic specific to the motion?
I believe that the motion is to approve entering into the memorandum of understanding with City of Bloomington Utilities on the anaerobic digester feasibility study, contingent upon legal counsel providing an affirmative opinion that given the way that this has been presented to us, that it is legal for the district to help fund the study.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Yes, I'm wondering if a part of the study could be to study the effect of disposing of these byproducts on farmers' fields and all. I mean, I understand that compost, of course, is very useful, but if it's bringing along with it other things, I would be concerned about that.
I have an answer to that.
Thank you.
That is indeed, and I think that was Ms. Jones asking that. That is certainly part of the study. The suitability of the materials for any kind of land application is certainly something that is in the study. So we would absolutely be doing that.
Thank you.
Mr. Manley?
I would add to that, Ms. Jones or Commissioner Jones, regulations for land application include threshold limits of certain heavy metals that might be present, as well as required tests for PCBs, semi and volatile organic compounds, et cetera. And that is quite obsessively tracked by the government, Indiana's government. So there is concern, biosolids are sometimes referred to as the culmination of a polluting society by some of the opponents to it, but there are safety measures in place.
Would you happen to know who, is it a federal thing or a state?
Oh,
The land application
Yeah,
program,
yes, I'm sorry.
it's delegated to the state of Indiana.
Yeah, that concerns me.
We're,
I'm happy to
we-
speak more about that.
we are already subject to all of those tests as well for our solids, even to haul them to a landfill. So, we regularly, we're already involved in that sort of monitoring. So one of the inputs to a study like this would include the composition of our waste stream. And by the way, we do have a rigorous industrial pretreatment program at CBU that regulates metals and lots of other contaminants. And we test for PCBs and all of those things at this time already. So it would certainly dovetail with what we're already doing.
thank you. Other questions or comments? Ms. Jones?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, it's not, my concern is where the thresholds are set at and who set them and how long ago and how much information did they have at the time that those regulations were set. And that's obviously a lot of questions to be asking, to look into.
We would definitely make sure that that was investigated carefully.
If there are no further questions or comments, let's move then to the question. Would you restate the motion, Mr. McGlasson? So we have the contingent part.
If I'm not muted. The motion is to enter into the memorandum of understanding with City of Bloomington Utilities regarding the feasibility study for an anaerobic digester, and on contingent upon legal counsel's opinion regarding the legality of the district doing so based on the manner in which it's been presented to us.
Very good. Thank you. This is an action for the board to take. And thank you very much for CAC for joining us in this discussion. Mr. McGlasson, would you call the roll, please?
Munson,
Yes.
Githens,
No.
Hamilton,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everybody. This was a long and deliberate discussion. And as we move on to the next agenda item, I will remind everyone our discussion point that this is not an either or situation with respect to the study and with the respect to getting to work on implementing our 5-year plan. So, does anyone have a presentation? Do you? Mr. Clausen?
Since we're wrapping that up, I would just want to thank Mr. Kelson, for his time. He's attended a number of meetings with us through this process, and we certainly appreciate his time and providing information and answering questions.
And I would like to thank the board.
Nelson, I didn't mean to just move right on to other business, but we haven't. Thank you again.
Yes, and I'd like to thank the board for participating in this. It will go to the Utility Service Board next, and then we'll move along with it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have a presentation regarding implementation of the 5-year plan? Is it just a discussion item?
My understanding when we established the agenda and I was putting the packet together that this memorandum of understanding was the only potential action item, and the other two are strictly discussion items for the CAC to provide input to the board on those two topics. And I would defer to Mr. Winia to present those.
Okay.
I don't have a presentation to begin with, but I wanted to propose starting with the plan progress portion, or the progress portion of the plan discussion, to see where it stands now, and also discuss the method for doing routine reports going forward. So Mr. McGlasson, if you have any information that you would be able to report on now in a general way, or potentially, if not, I think a good question would be, what would be the easiest way for you to be able, for you and the district staff to be able to provide those reports, particularly on some of the recurring items that are present in the plan?
Unfortunately, I can't say right now that I'm in a position, to address that. If there's a specific goal, objective, or topic in the plan, that I can certainly, try to address that as best I can. Apologize for not being fully prepared. But as far as, if we want to establish a schedule of routine updates or reporting on that, I think that, one thing that might be good to discuss here in relation to that, is and I think I realized in the plan, those are kind of listed out in an order prioritizing them. But that also doesn't necessarily mean that just because it's a top priority item, that it's appropriate or feasible for the district to address it right now. And so maybe we want to start looking at, within that priority structure, what are things that we really want to try to focus on, that we have the ability to start to try to address or implement at this time. And then once, staff has some idea of which things we want to focus on and start trying to move forward with, then we can start doing that and provide the reports at whatever interval is requested.
Mhm. That sounds good.
Yeah, I think that would be a good discussion for the planning part. And I think for the reporting part, I also wanted to ask if it would be beneficial to the district if the CAC were to prepare, say, a sheet of the items that are in the goals and objectives that have like recurring, that are of a recurring nature, or have metrics that specify like a certain frequency or number of events of something, where it would essentially be a box that staff could fill in, and an organized sheet that would be essentially the contents of the report. If that would be something that would be worth creating.
It would certainly be beneficial. I would just, ask that, that the board agree with, the format and, the schedule priority that's put out in that.
And it's less about knowing what the priority is so much as just what's being worked on. I think that the prioritization part of it would be part of the second part of this discussion about discussing what those priorities are and what is feasible for the district. And then for this part, I think it would just be good to also define a way to know where the district is on each thing.
Well, I just, to clarify one thing that in there, unless I misunderstood, it's all feasible for the district, or it wouldn't be in the plan. It's just a matter of timing and, you know, what can we tackle now and what do we need to put off for a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Ms. Piedmont Smith, sorry. I need a better rotating minute.
I thought what we were going to do today is go through the goals and objectives and see how we're doing on each one and maybe try to prioritize and say, okay, next big project should be this or that, or both of them, or. And at the executive committee meeting, we also discussed the possibility of creating a new staff position to implement some of these items. So that's what I was hoping we would do today. That, okay.
I'm at the pleasure of the two bodies. I'm willing to discuss whatever it is you'd like to discuss.
So like I'm on page 31 of the packet,
That's-
goals and objectives.
That's where we have to get to. I was just scrolling down. Thank you for that page number. So we have a number of categories of objectives. Education, source reduction, waste diversion, final disposal facilities, and cross-cutting these, we have revenues and expenses, including personnel. So let's go back to those categories. Would you?
Yes, Mr. McGlass, to put it up on the screen.
Yes, would you start with page 31? We have the education one, so we could shrink the page enough to see all the education recommendations. There are 4 of them. And there we go. Can you zoom in and bring up just the education one for right now, Mr. McGlasson? There we go. Thank you. Now everybody can see. Does anyone want to begin the discussion about how we're doing on these 4 items?
Well, we have the new website.
We do, we do.
We do, yes.
It actually seemed to take a long time to get there. I thought it'd be just a quick operation, but it wasn't.
You are correct. There was a lot of information in the website and a lot of discussion about how to make it optimized. So we definitely deliberately chose to focus on taking time to deliver a higher quality end product than to make a website quickly. That would be regrettable. But in relation to that, I do want to point out that with the, in particular, education goals and objectives, there are, I believe, 3 of them that have timelines associated with them, or I guess time targets associated with them, specified in the appendix of the goals and objectives, which would actually be on page 35 of the packet. And in particular, the website was one of them, and that was within the first 2 years of adoption. So that one is largely achieved. There's still the update of the flyers and other guides to really complete that goal. But the other one that I wanted to point out that I think is worth prioritizing is the rebranding of the district, which is goal number 3. And the timeline for that one is by ideally the end of year 1. And since this was adopted on September 9th, 2021, we are 7 months into the adoption of our 5-year management plan. So That's something that I also think is important because it's going to be the banner under which the rest of the district's outreach and changes are going to be. So it would be ideal to have that in place to be the face of the district as it's doing all of these programs.
Right.
And I think it should be prioritized accordingly.
And the same applies also to goal 1, which included updating the guide. But we would want that rebranding done before then.
Exactly, that was going to be my point, that we really have to, the rebranding needs to occur before we're going to spend money to reproduce any promotional materials or anything. And I think we discussed at the executive committee meeting, we also did budget money this year for new signage at the sites, and we will need that rebranding done before we can design and order signage. So that the rebranding is something that, for me at least, does need to be a priority item, particularly since I have appropriations that have to be spent by the end of the year.
Yeah, yes, you do. And it's not too long before we're already talking about next year's budget too.
Yeah.
So how do we move forward then with the rebranding steps? What's involved?
Well, I think sitting right here today and initiating a discussion, it is a start. I would, and I apologize, I did not think to ask her to attend this meeting, but I think, the rebranding in particular is something that we should probably ask Ms. Prolcrawl to participate in as our outreach coordinator. But that's not to say that we can't initiate a discussion and take some information to her and ask her to come back to the next discussion.
Anything else on that particular point? Any other suggestions? Mr. Winia?
I will also note that during the creation of the management plan, there were suggestions made also about a crowdsourcing option for the rebranding process. I know that an important consideration of that is that it would likely extend the timeline as well if we were to have just sort of an open outreach to anyone interested in participating rather than a direct contracted professional version, which would be a lot more expedient.
So did you just say that doing this in-house would be more expedient than contracting?
Doing this by contract would be more expedient than doing it by just open sourcing
Okay, yes.
the
Thank you.
rebrand to the general
Opposite.
public.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could make use of, that's not the right term. Ask marketing students in the Kelly School of Business to help with this. It's probably the timeline, it
It's
would
just-
probably have to be in the fall, and that would delay
Mhm.
action, but it would be a great class project and get a lot of youth engagement. Not everybody in Kelly School of Business is young, but probably more so than those of us sitting up here in any case.
I think if we approach them now and say by the end of the school year, that would be a good experience for them for the real world.
That's true.
Please.
Could you pull the mic up?
There we go. I guess I come from a communications background. I'm an older student and I'm in environmental now, just kind of tapping in, seeing what I can learn there and apply to better things. But I think it's helpful to include perspectives from the community in order to bring inclusiveness and increase participation rather than going to transient organizations and you have marketing specialists that may not necessarily be able to speak to the needs and barriers and things that kind of, things that we aren't aware of that keep people from participating. Whether is it disability, is it age, is it where you live, is it you're in an apartment and you just don't have the resources you actually want, So that's just what I'm going to throw in there from the communications side.
Thank you.
I'm a little bit curious of what you mean when you're saying rebranding. What are we rebranding and why?
I mean, we're looking at, the Go Green slogan, and, potentially the logo, depending on where we go with that. And I mean, and then beyond that, it's, that's going to start to, to drive the direction of our education and outreach programs. So like that's from my perspective, that's what we're looking at here.
I'll add to that, if I may. I'll just read what's listed in the education section for that goal and objective on page 31. It's in an age where a global climate crisis is rapidly unfolding and human activity is devastating natural planetary systems. The need to act rapidly is critical, but the urgency and individual necessity to do so are not adequately conveyed by the Go Green slogan. So it's about a focus of what is at stake and the obligation to act to underscore the importance of the district mission and the benefit it has to the community. It also mentions crowdsourcing the new logo, slogan, and brand could also be an effective means to increase community ownership, involvement, and awareness. And to Ryan's previous point, I think we could potentially do a hybrid version of doing community outreach first without actually charging the community with completing the task so much as just providing input to it. If we were to have again, like a limited or a designated time period of a month or two for community input, distribute that information, take what the community gives, and then incorporate that into the final method we use to produce the rebranding. And I do think that focusing on the language and the Go Green slogan are important in conveying the district's ultimate mission and purpose, and to really drive forward the initiatives that it has about all of the reduction and the recovery, more so than the sort of doing what is right, green sunshine effect it has now.
So I have a question regarding the possibility of a Kelly class taking on, working with us on this project. And I wonder if they ever have a summer course. Certainly IU runs year round. And does anybody know?
But the short answer is yes, and I might defer to some of our current students as to how intensive those courses are and what kind of time might be available to a side project like this.
Mm-hmm.
To my knowledge, most of the courses throughout the summer are on a 6 or 8 week basis, which doesn't, although they have longer hours than traditional classes throughout a semester, it would seem to be a rather rushed option.
Okay.
That might not be robust.
So it looks like it would be fall at the earliest before we could involve help from Kelly.
I would just, staff could certainly, make contact with Kelly School and inquire and see what the school itself might offer, or perhaps there's a student association or organization like a marketing club or something like that might be willing to take it on, outside of the academic setting of Kelly School.
Well, I've been involved with several organizations that have partnered with Kelly classes, and they have been generally successful and helpful. So I'll pass on to you, Tom, the contact information for who participated in those programs, so you can find out which faculty and classes they work with.
Okay, be great.
So other things regarding education, or have we picked what we want to work on most, and we should be considering other categories? Other categories. Those are source reduction would be next. Excuse me.
Sorry, I think Mr. Winia and I both had something more to say about the education.
Okay, Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I do just want to note that, as I had mentioned, some of these are more tasks of a recurring nature than a one-time nature. So it's more about continued reach in a particular direction. And if I were to take goal number 4 as an example for improving, expanding the outreach network, the metrics, this is a bad example because they aren't specified, but the metrics have targets of establishing certain numbers of things per regular time period, certain number of outreaches or tracking participant involvement or subscribers to things. So that's not something that I would think would necessarily need to be prioritized as doing sooner or later, but just an ongoing recurring type event that can start at any time and then just indicate how much of that outreach is being done over that time period, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would piggyback onto that and say that this is an area where we might make good use of a new staff member
Yes.
who has expertise in outreach and making community connections and social media as well.
I think that would be a very good adjunct to rebranding as well, because rebranding will involve a lot of outreach. So it'd be good to have a new staff person involved from the start.
I would agree. And I, part of what goes through my mind in looking at this and, going in some different directions and expanding and, I don't want to stretch Ms. Procral too thin. She's doing a lot in the schools now that we're able to get back in the schools and trying to continue some of the virtual things that we started when she couldn't be in the schools. And, we start adding more things on, and I worry that we stretch her too thin, and I certainly don't want to put her in that position.
So how do you want to discuss the possibility of a new position, what's involved here, and the cost? Do you want this to go to the executive committee? Do you want this to be a general board discussion? What's our plan?
Well, I mean, I think if the suggestion here is that we move forward with pursuing adding a position, it would be appropriate for staff and the executive committee with CAC input. We would need to develop a job description, and based on that job description, look at a salary range, and then once we have all of that, we would bring that to the full board for consideration.
Okay, well, let's put that in our work plan to get ready for the presentation to the executive committee, and then the CAC always has been there this year. I think that's a really good step. Do we need to take any action, or is this a collective nod of the head?
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's.
Okay, we're nodding heads.
I think it would, staff on its own could bring to the executive committee, we want to create a new position. After we done that.
And we hear that kind of thing all the time. No, we don't. No, we don't. I'm sorry, I rushed us out of education. Did we finish up with what you wanted to say? Okay. Source reduction. Are there time-sensitive goals here, or portions of goals that we should be attending to?
The only other time-sensitive goal was also in education, which was goal number 1. It had the longest timeline because it was a kind of a large-scale project. And that was the main media outreach campaign, which would also need to follow the rebranding.
Yeah, right.
And so that can be revisited then after that. Also, I'll just note that in a general way, the categories of goals and objectives are also specified mostly in terms of impact, more so than maybe time urgency, in the sense that education, highest impact, source reduction, next highest, waste diversion, next highest. So in terms of trying to maximize our impact, it would be ideal to do it in that order, but that doesn't mean that they're all necessarily time, like first to last ordered and how they should be approached.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak about goals that they would like to see us moving on under source reduction.
I would just, point out that number 2 there, a proactive business outreach, might be something that would fall under that potential new position.
Certainly expanding our green business network has been a longstanding interest of mine, because I think we are falling very far short here. And I think the potential is out there. But again, it can take extra hands on deck. So, Ms. Piedmont Smith.
And I guess, I mean, the Green Business Network is important, but I think we get a bigger bang for the buck if we prevent waste to begin with, rather than focusing so much on recycling. So I think there's a lot of education that can be done with businesses that work with food or other organic wastes. As well as MCCSC. We now have a representative on the CAC from the school system. And, not just organic waste, but also containers and such. I think there's a lot that can be done to just reduce waste to begin with, which is one step better than recycling.
I would just, to remind everybody here and watching that, one of the things that we do under the Green Business Network program, we offer waste audits. And, whether they're going to, ultimately sign on to the Green Business Network or not, if they reach out to us and ask, we will come in and do a waste audit. And part of that would be identifying areas that you can reduce from the get-go, reduce what you're purchasing, and which would in the end reduce waste.
So, Mr. McGlasson, who carries out the audits?
It would generally be done by our GBN coordinator, Joe McNeil, or Assistant Operations Director, Joey Long. I think that over the course of time, Ms. Procrawl has done them, Scott Morgan has done them, I've done them. And sometimes it's a combination of multiple, just kind of depending on the specific circumstances and situations of the business that's asking. But we don't do enough of them.
No.
We would love to do more of them, whether you're going to be a GBN client or not.
Is there a fee involved?
No. We obviously do them with the ultimate goal of generating a new GBN client, but at the end of the audit, for any number of reasons, it doesn't always result in that outcome.
Well, there has been one business discussion about waste reduction that Ms. Pokrell did, right?
Mhm.
And was the audit program presented then? Do you know?
I don't, and I apologize. I don't believe that was a session I was able to attend, and I would have to go back and review the recording of it.
So how often are those programs planned for
So
that Ms. Pokrell offers to businesses?
you're talking about the webinar series, the
Yeah.
Green Chat webinar series that she did. Well, they were, that's kind of in limbo right now. We were doing them monthly, and then things changed with the schools, and now she has gotten back in the schools,
Ah.
and that's
So now
comes
we
back
need
to where I
another
worry
thing.
about spreading her too thin, because we're trying to continue that. She's trying to get back into what she's been doing in the schools, and so we're looking at how we're going to continue to schedule the webinars and
Okay.
find guest speakers and topics. So
Okay, thank you. So anybody have, Mr. Winnick?
Yeah, I'll just note, if I may, I think that kind of aligns with goal number 2 about the proactive business outreach in general. It's just about growing the GBN activities And then also including the source reduction component of it more so than the recycling component.
And just to follow up on that, yeah, that's, and again, you come back to the potential new position, because that is, we don't do a whole lot of, I guess, trying to identify and reach out to those businesses. Most of the time it's them coming to us. Now, we've discussed earlier at a previous meeting, our membership with the Chamber of Commerce, and that, Ms. Pokral and I are out at those chamber events, and we do promote that program and try to get people in touch with Mr. McNeil and so forth. But there certainly is more that the district could be doing to reach out to potential businesses that could be a GBN client, and that hence the goal.
I think there's one of those events next week, is there not?
Mhm.
So where are we going here with identifying what we want to work on? Under waste diversion.
Oh, are we already on waste diversion? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was source reduction. Right.
For the local political engagement, I think this is related to the next item on the agenda, which is apartment recycling.
Yes.
I know we in the city council have discussed, requiring apartment management to have a contract for recycling services, which would probably lead to negative repercussions on a state level. But so that's what the only thing I can think of as far as political engagement. I don't know if any other ideas are floating out there for ways in which local government could help with waste reduction.
So that would be for city government, but it could also be for county government, because there are apartment complexes being built in the county as well.
Well, and from my perspective, and it's not really expressly in the way it's worded in the plan here, but when we were doing the plan, what also came to my mind in here in this section, was also we're working with the county attorney's office and the county commissioners regarding the solid waste ordinance, and there are things that we can do in there that would help to prevent illegal dumping. And deal with properties that have solid waste violations, and there are things that we can do to make that process more effective and more efficient.
So where would you like to go next? To waste diversion? It gets us right back. Number one is taking us into education again. Education is in every category.
The education is definitely a pervasive component of the plan, but in this particular one, I think goal number 2 is one that I had in mind and mentioned during the comparison of the impact of spending on the biodigester versus alternatives. And I think this is one alternative. Goal number 2 is coordinating the rerouting of usable waste. Food waste comes to mind in particular, and it even references several city goals that are for dealing with recovering edible food waste. And that's one that I think just has far, far greater possibilities than biodigestion, which is basically another final disposal stream with better benefits than landfilling. But if an equivalent amount of effort were spent on managing usable waste streams, I think that would go a lot farther. I know that would go a lot farther for upstream impacts and planetary impact reductions. And It's one that I know is bigger in scope and why I equated it to the scope of the biodigester project versus the other goals and objectives specified here, which are all smaller in scope.
So about recovering usable food, I know the Hoosier Hills Food Bank does have a program and their own partners there. So I don't know if we can do anything except help support them doing this, because that's something that they've already tackled. But it's certainly something we can help educate the community about too, as part of whatever we do.
I think
They also generate a lot of organic waste. And I know because they used to try to compost it at our place. And that's the problem for them.
So so everybody who is involved in the process is a producer of waste along the way.
Yes.
Hearing in the board reports for departments earlier, I think it was the operations manager, their name's slipping my mind, noted about the secondary waste containment donation from Catalent, I believe.
Yep.
That gave me an idea. I was thinking, what if we could develop some sort of classifieds for businesses within the community? They have to register with the district. Maybe a requirement that their actual business register with the Secretary of State, so we don't get like individuals, but that would be a good way to coordinate business to business waste diversion and reuse. And I'm not sure if that's been explored before or not.
To my knowledge, that is not something that the district, at least not in my time, has explored, and that's certainly a good suggestion. Yeah, I mean, it's worth an, I have, no idea how many businesses might be interested in that, but obviously, as Joey had said, we routinely, Catalan and Cook, we have good relationships with. They routinely donate items that the district needs and uses, or that wind up at our materials for the arts program and get distributed that way. So.
Mr. White.
I'm reminded of being in elementary school over at Spencer, that we had an education thing about soaps. And it'll relate. I remember going home after one of those many discussions we had in school, and it was a hot summer day, and we were all gonna strip our clothes, run down to the pond and take a swim and cool off. And Mom said to us, take a bar of soap with you so you can wash while you're there. And I got really upset at her. Couldn't tell you what I said other than absolutely not. I'm not taking soap down to the pond to pollute the pond. Education in our elementary schools. I really believe, and I've touted this for some while, that we need to be coming up with programs that kindergartners, first graders, and so on can understand about. We used to say reduce, reuse, and recycle. In order to teach our children, because old fogies like us, and yes, I'm sorry, Miss Piedmont Smith, I'm including you in that. Old fogies like us are hard to change. We can change, but it's hard for us to get out of the ruts that we've been in for so many years, and a rut is a grave with the ends knocked out. But if we can start with our youngsters in the elementary education systems to learn how to not do something that would be non-beneficial for themselves, for our environment, to remember, don't take so much food if you're not going to eat it. Things we all learned as youngsters. But to scrape the food into a container that we can take to a place who can compost that, not naming any names here. Just all the education things seems to go a long way in the plan that we're trying to plan here to keep our planet for our future generations. I really believe that we need to come up with a plan, and it incorporates our school superintendents, our school principals, down to the teachers to get this thing to work so it'll work. And it's so vital. And we really need to come up with a plan for that.
I mean, I would just add, that Ms. Procrell spends a lot of time in elementary schools specifically, but also the junior high and the high schools, but predominantly the elementary schools. And, a lot of programs that, that discuss just what you described. Food waste is an interesting and unique one because it's only been recently that we've actually had an alternative for that. This is recyclable. This isn't, composting and, historically it's focused on at-home composting because that was the only alternative, that was available. But she does a lot of that stuff and has done it for a long time, and has a number of the local elementary schools that, every year she's in there multiple times a year. The same teachers bring her back every year. No such thing.
So
I wonder if churches and other faith communities could also be a good venues for reuse in the community. I don't know, it just came to me that, that's a lot of times people go there once a week. Maybe that would be, they could do a swap once a month or something like that. I don't know. Brainstorming.
So where are we going with this? Have we exhausted ourselves on the diversion and ready to discuss final disposal facilities? Or, Mr. Conway?
Just a quick question on waste diversion. So I hear a lot from a lot of different folks that would have an interest in like a construction and demolition reusable materials housing facility, even just a simple warehouse, because there's just so much embodied energy in those from a climate perspective. And then, with inflation and building materials costs have gone up a lot in the last few years. There's a lot of contractors that could both efficiently for their bottom line and for the environment salvage these materials. And I don't know, would it just be a rental fee? And I'm sure insurances would be involved. Have we tried that before, like a warehousing kind of a thing?
Well, Restore has,
But they don't do like the boards that come out of
no,
things.
they
and
don't do
things
boards.
like that.
It's really certainly not demolition stuff.
Restore does some, but we get those calls from time to time. Restore doesn't want it. What do I do with it? It's still, there's nothing wrong with this 2x4. So yeah, it has been something, that's been considered, not in depth. And maybe that's something that we do need to do now. But to your question about how it happens, yeah, location is, just like with apartment recycling, we've got to find a location. It's got to be convenient. It's got to be affordable, and but there are still some challenges, to do it if it is something we want to move forward with, but also not something that we have fully investigated.
Okay, then, on to final disposal.
Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Whitney.
If I may, sorry, one more note. I'll make it quick. Goal number 4 is expansion of the compost end user market, which I think is an important one to treat maybe more timely than anticipated as the food waste recovery grows in the community. And in particular, as Earth Keepers Compost continues to expand, there is an increasing volume of finished composts. And I even just recently came across the joint meeting from March 2019 with the composters in the community. And it was expressed even then, the value of having municipal policies and buy-in and SOPs that put compost to use so that as we grow collection and as the volume is produced, that those who are producing it have a market for it to go to, so that we don't end up with this glut of great compost that we've focused on creating and no revenue for those creating it and no place for the compost to go. So I think that may be more important than I was even aware of during the creation of these goals and objectives that I think would be worth revisiting sooner than later.
I do have to second that. Our service provision for the hauling side has been growing incredibly rapidly. And to the extent that we're even considering building a second facility that's nearby, because we've got a lot of great support. City of Bloomington has us recruiting 16 restaurants over the next 12 months. And we've also got lines into IU and MCCSC to jumpstart their composting programs as well. So for us, we are growing a lot in terms of our production output, and we can bag a lot of that, which we're happy to do, like for the farm stop and for local hardware stores and stuff. But before we get into regional distribution logistics, which is a different kind of ballgame for a little size like us, it would be nice to see local government adopting parks plans and landscaping plans that incorporate these beneficial products. Compost products, can help, municipalities and companies save money. There are alternatives to different types of other fertilizers and plastics that can be used, for soil retention or, post-construction, redevelopment growth. There's a lot of different purposes for it that could be more cost competitive now, especially as the industrial oil market is going through upheavals and will for years to come. Russia is a major player. OPEC has said we cannot fill that demand gap. And the US and Western Europe aren't going to be playing ball. So, the cost of fertilizers, cost of plastics, we're already seeing it now. It's going up, up, up. So a locally created and produced recovery resource that then stimulates, specialty crop. So when you go to the farmer's market, you're not buying this corn and soy that, we get from larger conventional operations. You're buying specialty crop stuff, and to boost our local organic market. We're really big into, organic as well, which, part of why we're looking into building a second facility is that it would give us even more space to have a separate organic line of products. So I think it was my folly to not catch this as part of the discussion, and I'm glad that Joe mentioned it, because we really do need support on that, because we're starting to get it. People are starting to wake up to the food waste thing, and that's creating a lot of good compost.
Thank you. Well, having a directory of organizations with finished compost for sales is a pretty easy step to do. That's something we could put out on the website quickly. It just needs to be talked about in other venues. So to get the information out there, social media, etc. Okay. Where are we off to next?
I think we're ready for final disposal facilities.
Oh, okay, let's do it. Anybody want to jump in?
I was the subcommittee chairperson for the final disposals facilities, so I thought I might start us off. Continued environmentally safe post-closure maintenance of the Monroe County landfill. That can be measured through issues with compliance that are documented by the department, the results of land facilities like inspections of the landfill itself. I think that's a pretty easy metric to measure. And if there is an issue, identify, let's say compliance issues are increasing, then we could focus our efforts towards addressing those. But if they're decreasing, then I think that's a cause for celebration. Moving on to explore recreational educational opportunities to the closed landfill. We have EPLI. We have the EPLI Institute for Parks and Public Lands here at the university, which I think would be an excellent opportunity for a capstone course to see if any part of the landfill or the lands south of the landfill the county owns could be converted to a public park. Now, I know Tom has brought up in the past, I think a lot of that's in a floodplain, but there has to be some sort of use that can be gotten out of that. And then I guess lastly, explore ways to make the landfill profitable. I guess this would include conversations with general counsel on whether or not we could lease green space within that area for composting operations or whatnot, because there are already like controls for stormwater and whatnot that may be able to somehow be incorporated into the facility itself. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I just want to point out that I can't remember the last time we got cited by item for a problem at the landfill. Just saying.
Just saying. We already have gold stars on that one. Okay.
I know. I honestly, I don't think since it was certified closed, I don't think we've had a single violation. So.
Well, it's a good chunk of real estate and more could be done with it to benefit our community. And with the changing of Tri-North operations and the sledding hill that is no longer a sledding hill, I just wonder, why can't we have this be a wonderful sledding hill for? Okay, I got a real,
Parking is an issue.
oh, parking's an issue and I got a real negative back and forth of the head on that.
No, I will say that, and I mean, I was employed by the district, but it was before that I was director. It's probably been 9 or 10 years ago. We actually did have some pretty in-depth discussions with County Parks and Rec, and they were out there, they toured, they looked at things, you know, and they had a lot of ideas of things that they could potentially do out there. Unfortunately, financial constraints really prohibited them from, you know, in essence, expanding, you know, their parks offerings at that time. You know, I don't, you know, maybe it's time to reach out to them again and see if their financial situation is different today than it was back then. But that has been looked at, but it's been some time.
Other things regarding final disposal? Well, I think we had a good discussion of our priorities, and let me see if I can bring us back to a summary. Important, and that's not the apartment thing is still on our agenda. I think we want to move along with rebranding as a top priority and incorporate into our discussions and planning the possibility of a new staff person, what this would involve. And these things can begin fairly quickly. Certainly the staff questions. Is there anything else that should be coming along for our immediate attention based on our discussion? Okay. So then, if you're willing to wrap this up, we do have one more important agenda item, something we've talked about for multiple meetings. Let's give it a shot with discussion on apartment recycling and where we are.
Do you want me to provide an update on where we are and that? So, excuse me. Yeah, I mean that is obviously something that, you know, the staff, at least, you know, we've been looking at for some time, and unfortunately, just we're not not having a lot of luck identifying a good location to do that. I was able to get some some data from the city that outlined where the multi-residential properties were. That would help us zero in on biggest bang for the buck, what location is going to hit the most residents or be accessible to the most residents. Then the issue is finding a location that we can site a facility at. I've inquired with College Mall, not gotten any response from them. The Blooming Foods East had some interest in it, but that was before the old Kmart lot project took off. And I honestly don't know what that means for their store there on the east side. And, I haven't had much communication with them, of late. There are, downtown is ideal, but the worst as far as the financials of citing a facility downtown is the worst case scenario. And then we've had some discussions in the executive committee, about this, and we need an excess of 15,000 square feet to cite an appropriate facility, possibly more depending on the shape of the facility. And we need to be able to have it secured. It's got, we have to have access to roll off trucks, large heavy trucks. So we have to have the space for those to be able to get in and out, maneuver in the facility. Got to have roads that are rated for those weights. So there's a number of things that we have to take into consideration as we try to site a facility. And it's a frustrating process going through all the Google Maps aerials, the GIS aerials, trying to look for those vacant areas, find who owns it, and see if they have any interest. We're doing that, just not having a whole lot of luck at this point.
Anyone else for some input, Mr. Manley?
I feel like I'm being quite loquacious tonight. Something I mentioned at the previous meeting was the concept of maybe we don't invest in a new facility, but we sort of establish a mobile trailer option. I've been looking at a website, Protainer. I actually put a quote in. I didn't use our name, but I was just, but they have trailers that go on the back of a regular pickup truck. They have gooseneck, that goes in the bed of a truck. They're smaller, they can get into places. Of course, the issue would be volume, like an apartment could very much overwhelm this very quickly, but maybe purchasing one and seeing how it goes, or multiple, like a small fleet of these that can be located on demand anywhere, especially that could be used to address local community events downtown and whatnot, dropping them off and whatnot. I know the district has an unfilled truck driver position that could be used to manage those spots, or the trailer itself and whatnot. That's something I've been kind of thinking about.
Okay. Well, I would be interested in seeing articles or photos, whatever, videos describing these. So if you have them, would you share them with the district and the board?
I'll draft up a little email for you all.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. McGlasson, when you pick up the recyclables from the county buildings, what size vehicles do you use here?
Well, that's a part of the Green Business Network.
Right.
The courthouses or the county is a client for the Green Business Network, and that we have a 20-foot box truck and I think a 17-foot box truck. And off the top of my head, I don't know which one generally comes here, and it can vary because sometimes they'll pick multiple spots up and, you know, or often they'll pick multiple spots up in the same route. And, but that's, you know, and you have the 96 gallon rolling toters similar to what the, you know, the city uses for their curbside, you know, collection that we provide to those GBN clients and pick them up at the frequency that they need. You know, doing that for apartments, you know, we have one apartment complex that is a GBN client. And I think it's about a 40 unit complex. You know, and that works. But, you know, to do a 200 unit complex, we can't do that. That would overwhelm that program. That would require, you know, multiple trips in the same day to collect. And probably more totes than we could provide to them, assuming the majority of the residents participate.
So for the 40 apartment building, how often do you have to go for pickup?
I would have to check. I would have to check with Joe and see what schedule they're on. But I think that, you know, Mr. Manley's, you know, idea of some sort of a portable unit, I mean, that's a legitimate suggestion and that's worth investigating. You know, it may not be suitable for, you know, for all potential apartment complexes or scenarios that we may get involved in, but, you know, that just because it doesn't fit everybody doesn't mean it's not worth looking at and pursuing.
Well, and I wonder if we could pursue a two-pronged approach of the very large apartment complexes regulating and saying you must have recycling pickup. You show us your contract once a year. You got to do it. Of course, the state will probably say we can't do that, but we could try. And then the smaller complexes, we could offer this kind of portable trailer pickup, you know, once a month or once a week or whatever. But just I encourage you to keep in mind that, you know, which would be most effective and most efficient to have, and most feasible, I guess, needs to be in there too, to provide a drop-off location or a portable drop-off location, or to try to legislate and require apartment management companies to have their own contracts to pick up recycling. Like I said, it may be a combination of the two, but we should keep both in mind and kind of see, maybe look at the literature, the studies out there and see what's most effective.
I'm sorry, I had to leave for a minute. I'll let you continue on so I won't be interrupting where you were.
We're just talking about recycling for apartment dwellers.
Okay.
Just to touch a little more on the mobile option that was mentioned, I have saw some of the fairs, maybe even our local county fair has a mobile recycle trailer there. So they are around. I think it would be a good option.
You said the Monroe County Fair, you think has that?
I believe I've saw one at the Monroe County Fair. I know the state fair has them as well, but I think we have one locally.
Actually, I think they could use a couple more.
I agree, but they do seem like they get used.
Yeah. So anyway, that's something that we could look into very soon, because the fair is going to be coming up, and this community is anxious to have a real fair. Mr. Winnie.
Yeah, I do have one more comment, if I may. I would just like to note that I agree with Mr. Manley's remarks about the upfront, again, capital costs and investment on having a full-scale facility, and that a lighter version might be or would likely be a more practical option, and maybe even more towards Ms. Piedmont Smith's line of thinking, that if the district could serve more as a coordinator to those apartment complexes to find out what the barriers are and what potential solutions are, rather than providing them the collection service, connecting them or overcoming hurdles that they have in getting that service, and potentially an easier alternative than mandating it as well if there are already providers or multifamily housing developments that have interest in recycling but have reservations or limitations that could be overcome. That could be an easier lift for the district to serve in that capacity than trying to establish a full-scale facility to provide that service in that less than ideal and even difficult space to work in.
The more we discuss, the more a new staff person seems to be on our docket.
I think that would be helpful.
We've already maybe made 2.5 jobs at this point.
At least.
Anything else about apartments? For the good of our order tonight. Thank you for staying with us. Mr. Luca. If there's nothing further, let's say this was a very good opportunity for us to meet together, all of us. And we don't have to formally meet like this to set up a meeting. You all are welcome at every one of our meetings. And and we certainly have opportunity for public comment at every meeting, and also comments from the directors. So I think we can be more collaborative in the future, and I look forward to working more closely with you. Thank you.
Just for a point of clarification, you said that the city of Bloomington is building a bunch of new apartments, and there's some being built in the county too. The city of Bloomington is part of the county.
Of course.
Just for a point of clarification, so is the town of Steinsville, Ellettsville, and any other bill that I've forgotten. We are all part of Monroe County.
Thank you, sir.
Some of us appreciate this very well. Well, if there's nothing further, then we will adjourn and hope to see you again at even not specially called meetings, but we will have a specially called meeting for the budget. We will do that as part of our plan, but hope to see you all again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.